understand, seems like I'm doing some uh, teaching, and that I was teaching how to fix DAs over Zoom for the last 3 years when I was here. So today I'm gonna talk about dairy farming in Latin America. Uh, I'm gonna focus a little bit more on the Colombian production system because I'm more familiar with that. But I end up asking a bunch of my former interns and residents to send me pictures from the farms that they work in Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador. So I have some more pictures there. So the outline of the talk is we're gonna go through a brief description of some systems in Latin America, pasture based, then some specific numbers of the Colombian dairy production, and challenges and opportunities from that system. Some research that we did in 2017 with Dr. Jess McCart, Tom Overton, Miguel Gomez, Sabine Mann. It was sponsored by the Atkinson Center. Sent a group of students to do some measurements in hyperketonemia in Colombia and characterize the farms. There was some other work more on the social aspect of the dairy farming that is unpublished, and I'm not the expert on that area, so I'm just gonna briefly touch on that because if somebody is here in economics, is gonna kill me with that part. So I'm not gonna go into the deep roots of that. The production levels in Latin America are growing compared with the rest of the world. That's why it's so important to focus on their sustainability. Um, as we can see, they're increasing the dairy production. Uh, it's happening in two areas: the number of animals and the land that they're using. Uh, we will see later some of the figures about efficiency, which is not increasing. So this is a trade-off. We still have some land available in South America and Latin America for agricultural production, where we can use it long term. It's still unknown, and if we keep going in the same way that we're going, we probably won't be using that land for too long. We have a great variety of farms. These are some farms from Colombia, places where they milk one cow to 10, 50 cows. That's the average of the herd in Colombia for specialized milk. And then we have some other large operations, mostly in Argentina and Brazil, very similar to what we can see here in the US. They're confined units where we provide TMR, total mixed ration, for the people that are not familiar with the cow world. And they're based on corn or soy with some other forages that grow in the area, but we bring it to animals. The smaller farms in the Andes region, mostly we keep the cows on pasture and they're in charge of harvesting their own food. So there are some difference right there. And yeah, I mentioned there are some difference on their size, and that comes with different practices. Let's see if this plays here.
Si usted le
When I was
enseñar a
growing
una persona
my
a
father
ordeñar, a
small
sacar leche,
farm,
¿cómo le
probably
cómo le
20, 30
enseñaría?
cows.
Ahí, usted que
This
está
morning we'll wake up,
que está ordeñando,
go
¿cómo le
and milk the
enseñaría?
cows by hand.
¿Cómo le enseñaría usted ahí?
Ah, que me vea primero.
Por eso, ahí que le ve
10
el hombre que
minutes,
está
Sí,
haciendo.
que
get
me
one.
vea y ya después lo...
Me, it was
Ya, porque es
probably
que
20
ahí
minutes. Right
con la
now,
derecha
we
está ordeñando a dos
have
dedos
Sí.
y ve a la izquierda lo que
carousels.
está haciendo.
This is a carousel in Brazil. You can milk
Que hay mucha gente
100
que no
cows
sabe ordeñar.
Sí.
Sí,
minutes,
hay gente que no
more or
sabe
less.
ordeñar. Y es un
So quite
proceso
efficient
sencillo, pero de todos
compared with
modos necesita
hand milking. The last farm that I worked in Colombia,
que se haga con el
we were milking 200 cows.
van cogiendo hueso, porque de todos modos
It
ese
was
músculo,
Esfuerzo.
automatic
músculo que existe allá,
parlor. One
ahí
day there was no
la vaca
electricity,
pues
so
uno ve y dice, no, pues este ya
one
le
milk
chuma
200
y
cows by
ya
hand.
no me cabe la
Took us the
mietica.
whole day. Got it done. I couldn't move my
Y la
hands
fuerza
next
no
day,
era,
but
no.
it was okay.
La cosa tiene que ser
So
así.
a different system. This is a farm in Argentina, robotic milking machines. You don't have the labor to do the manual or the
Vamos aprendiendo a hacer las cosas.
parlor milking.
De
You
ver,
have
mire
this
el
option,
proceso que hace usted con
but
el
yeah,
sistema.
it's hard to the funding
muchas
or
Sí.
support this kind of large infrastructure investments for some dairy
de
farms.
una manera y
Sí.
la otra lo está haciendo de otra.
So not only the size of the or the number of animals, the amount of land, but the infrastructure and technology that they have at the farm is
Sí.
wide,
Pero ya
quite wide.
escurriendo,
Descorriendo remuda.
Yeah, this video I think he takes like 6 minutes to milk a cow. And then we have different topography for the dairy production. From sea level, all the valleys in Colombia have dairy cows. They don't produce that much milk because of the weather. They're more dual purpose, and I'll show the breakdown of the or the herds in Colombia. And then we have most of the specialized milk production in the Andes Mountains is our or 3,200 meters, which is around 10,000 feet for sea level, which is quite high. That's perfect weather for cows, for dairy cows especially. It's between 5 degrees and 16 degrees Celsius, so 38, 40 to around 60, 65 Fahrenheit. So quite big range on altitude as well. And that comes with difference in pasture that you can grow or forages that you can harvest to feed the cows. More into the specifics of the dairy production in Colombia. There is something very interesting, and this is not only for Colombia, but these are the numbers for Colombia. Brazil, Mexico, and some other countries in Latin America have these dual purpose cattle breeds. They're not quite specific for meat production because they also produce a good amount of milk, but they're not quite milk breeds. They can be just used for both. And the big proportion of the milk in Colombia is produced by these type of animals. Also by the cow-calf operations, which are operations that focus on producing a calf every year, and then they sell the calf for beef operations, but they still milk the cows. They can get 1 or 2 liters a day, and it's a nightmare to milk these cows. Most of them try to kill you every time that you get too close. They're CU cows, and they're not easy to handle. On top of that, if you don't have the calf next to a cow, it's impossible to get the 2 pounds of milk that you're trying. So when the calf dies, you need to take the skin of the calf, put it on top of another calf, and bring that calf with the skin so you can get the milk, which is a lot of labor for 1 or 2 pounds of milk a day. And that's a big chunk of milk production in Colombia, which happens in lowland, close to sea level. And then we have the finished animals, which are calves that are going for beef. Specialized milk, it's not as much. Same breeds as in the US, Holstein, Jerseys, Brown Swiss. And the interesting part is that we put basically the same genetics that we have in US, Canada, and Europe, but in the tropics. So we put these cows in these slopes in the Andes Mountains, and you can see once in a while a cow running down the hill. Because they cannot stand, they're so tall, they need to go up and down the hill to harvest their own food, and it's not ideal. We have some breeds, I know Heather, you did some work with the Promocionaron in the past. Those breeds were brought by the Spanish and had hundreds of years of adaptation to the climate and topography in Colombia. They produce very well meat and milk, and we're not using them up to their potential. That's not very well shown in this figure, but there are some other options other than putting a Holstein cow in Colombia. So this map is showing where most of the milk production happens in Colombia. The specialized one happens in the center, close to the capital. Bogotá is the capital of Colombia and has a population of around 10 million people. So most of the production concentrates around that area to supply the capital demand. The next biggest producer is around this area. It is the second major city, Medellin. And again, it's good weather and close to a major urban area, so it's easy to transport the milk, provide food for humans. Sorry. And the rest, dual purpose and cow calf operations are both the Amazonas or in between the valleys in the Andes Mountain. Hard to transport the milk. Uh, it's really difficult to make that milk into consumption for humans if it's not raw. And I'll talk about this later. So the average milk production in Colombia, it's about 5.5 liters, which is extremely low. And that's pulled by the cow calf operations and beef animals that we milk that don't produce anything. But it's a big number of the cows, and they're the ones producing most of the milk in Colombia. The specialized milk production uh, breeds are here. It's, but still really low. So I'm gonna jump into the challenges that the dairy industry in Colombia faces right now. Obviously, climate change is one of them. When I was a kid, long time ago, we don't have seasons like here. There is only dry season and rainy season. Rainy season used to be April, beginning of May, and then June, July was dry season always. August, it was windy. Everybody's just flying kites. September, October starts getting rainy again. November is kind of the transition between the rainy season and dry season. December and January, vacation time, was always hot, dry season. Now, there's no way to predict when it's the rainy season or dry season. So it could be 6 months of rain or 6 months or to a year without rain. And the interesting part is that when the dry season, between 1 and 7 in the morning, the temperature drops below freezing, so all the pastures dies. Doesn't have any water, on top of that freezes, and we usually don't have that type of temperature, so the pasture takes forever to recover. The lack of forages, it's a big issue for dairy production during this time. And then we have the rainy season, and when it starts raining for 6 months, everything just gets water. There is no place to put the animals. Obviously, it takes forever to recover that pasture because nothing will grow again. Next challenge, diseases. I'm going to talk about just a few that we focused on the last probably 3 or 4 decades in Colombia. Ectoparasites and, well, internal parasites as well, because most of the cows are in pasture, so they're more exposed to ticks and internal parasites. And then some bacterial and viral infections that are key for like dairy production. When I was in private practice in Colombia, the last 2 years after I graduated and before moving here, I spent at least a week in the farms that I managed doing some type of tick control, which means just bats for all the cows. And the amount of products that we use and the effect of those were not good at the point every tick was resistant, and it just takes forever. So that's one of the biggest issues, at least in the lower areas. Now the temperature is increasing. When I was a kid, you wouldn't see any ticks in the high Andes mountains. Now they're going up and up because the temperature is increasing. So that's bringing the issue higher in the mountains, and you need to spend more and more money and more time trying to fight these issues. Diseases, viral foot and mouth disease. It's an endemic virus in Colombia or in Latin America, I'll say. There is a program that started in the early 1980s to eradicate foot and mouth disease. This is a disease that is very contagious within cattle, and basically all the animals that have hooves that are separated, swine, goats, and other species. It's very contagious, and if you don't have it in your country, you don't want anything to do with countries that have that. So they basically close the market for you. Colombia exports a lot of live cattle and a lot of meat, so that produces quite a significant losses, economic losses for them when we had the last outbreaks. We have in place vaccination program every 6 months. Issues with that, when you vaccinate a cow and the cow is pregnant, there is a chance that the cow is going to lose the pregnancy, can produce fever, so there is a risk there. You cannot predict if the cow is going to be 6 months or 8 months when you show up, because the cycles of vaccination are fixed during the year. So it starts January and February, and then June, July. When you show up to a farm, vaccinate a cow, and this cow loses the pregnancy, that farmer is more likely to say, next time, I'm not vaccinating my cows. And then they spread the message. This vaccine produces abortion, so we're losing money. But they don't see in the long run what is the effect of having another outbreak of foot and mouth disease in the country. This is going to close the market. So this is one of the biggest issues. The last two outbreaks that happened in Colombia, one was in a recent in the center of the country, in the capital, which didn't spread that far because there are not that many cows around. It was just a biosecurity issue, and it was contained really quick. The second one was in 2018 and 2017, happened in the border between Colombia and Venezuela. With the economic crisis in Venezuela, there was a lot of black market of live cattle between the two countries, and Venezuela stopped vaccinating for foot and mouth disease, I think, more than 10 years ago. So there is no control of the disease there; it's endemic, and we were bringing back and forth animals without any paperwork, any vaccination history. So we got some cows, and they were sold illegally and spread to the country, and we had a massive outbreak. It was contained within 2 years, but there is still a risk of having more outbreaks because there are no controls in that border, and some farmers are not vaccinated. So big risk for the industry. The next one, infrastructure. There is something that we call in Colombia third generation roads, which mainly connects the small farms to big roads, and they're terrible. It's a combination of weather, topography, and corruption. When it starts raining, there's no way to drive through those roads. I remember pushing trucks full of cattle when I was a kid up a mountain, then load the cows so like and the truck can go, and then load the cows again. Just a nightmare. And that's one of the biggest issues for the smaller farmers to bring their production to like big centers. They basically lose their production. This created, when you have these type of challenges, you just get creative. So we have the cows in big steep hills, so we cannot build a parlor. They can now walk back and forth from the hill. So you take the parlor there. You milk the cows there, but you don't have a cooling tank like we have here in the US in every single dairy farm. So we put the milk in these containers that are aluminum, that are called cantinas. When you start milking the first cow, it's probably, let's say, 3 a.m. When you finish with the last cow, probably 7 a.m. 4 hours, 3 hours that the milk is sitting there. Temperature is nice and toasty. It starts fermenting. On top of that, you need to load it into a horse, go down the hill or up the hill to the main road, and deliver that into somebody, either a truck or somebody with another horse that is going from other farms picking up the milk. By the time that this milk gets to a cooling tank, it could be 8 to 10 hours. Nice for yogurt or any other fermented beverage, but it's not good for fresh milk because they start growing bacteria very quick, and the spoilage is just insane. So I created something that is cultural and just creative, a big market for raw milk. Every single neighborhood in Colombia will have somebody in a motorcycle or a bike with one of these cantinas that selling raw milk every single day, every morning. And on top of it's really hard to make it to a market. It's also, uh, I believe, that pasteurization changed the flavor of the milk. And I can say it does because I remember when I was a kid, my father will just milk the cows in my mouth and it was delicious. Right now, like, I just drink pasteurized milk. If I try to do that, I'm gonna be dead or in the hospital for a week. I won't do it again. So big challenge. And also when you are doing just this, you are not adding any value to the milk. You cannot transform it into cheese or butter, and you're just losing money. Big one, violence in the last 15 years. Colombia had an internal conflict, and that affected all the agriculture, not only cattle production, at any scale. If you were a small farmer, um, these groups that were selling drugs will push you out of your land to get more land and put cattle that they stole from somebody else. Uh, my father was requested to give donations to these groups, and they will send him a list. This is the groceries that we need. We need this much gas by this day. If we don't get it, we'll take it. We couldn't afford it all the time, so sometimes they will show up with 3 or 4 trucks, load all the cows from the farm, and they took their money. So that happened several times to a lot of people, and that's how violence like just pushed back the agriculture in Colombia. And all these issues just increase the deforestation issues. Uh, I had a really nice friend that sent me these pictures. Uh, he changed his mind after going through um, animal science and doing a master's here. But this was his production way: just clear the forest by burning and putting more cows, because the land, the ecosystems that we use in some areas are so fragile that you cannot keep cows for a long time. They survive because they get organic matter from trees. When you burn the trees, they're really old soils. They just get eroded really quick with rain and wind, and so they just need to burn more land to put more cows, and they just keep spreading the issue. Um, and we put also cows in places that we shouldn't put cows. Uh, this is the Amazonas. Yeah, it's a very old soil. When you remove the trees, there is no more input of organic matter. It just doesn't produce for that long. So in the end, it's gonna be a desert in a few years. You need to put more trees and move farther into the forest. This is Valle of Coconut in Colombia. That's a national tree. Uh, Palma de Cera. It takes forever to grow. I think it grows like less than a meter a year. And we put cows there, and they just basically destroy the environment. And that tree, there is a bird in Colombia that only put their eggs in this tree that is disappearing because we destroyed the tree. So there are many consequences of putting cows in places that we shouldn't have cows. And this was my father's farm, which is in a place that produces 60 to 70% of the water for the capital. We shouldn't have cows there. We should have a forest. But basically, it acts as a sponge. The rain gets stored there and slowly released. It's called paramo, and the vegetation over there is unique. And we just replace that vegetation with potato crops and cows, because it's so high in the mountains that the disease incidence for both of those agricultural productions are so low. That is ideal. We shouldn't have cows there, and now I know that. But not everything is bad. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of things that we can do to improve dairy production in Latin America and Colombia. So we can produce forages all year round. Uh, problem is that we don't know what to do with the extra forages during the rainy season. In the high the mountains, the forages are not really high in energy, which is why we need in forages to ferment them and store them in silage. They're high in protein, which there are different techniques, but we ain't developed that much research on that on this specific area. So a lot of research is needed in how to store the excess of forages that we can produce during specific times of the year to bridge the rainy season with the next rainy season. Now that it's getting longer than 6 months, you can see the grass is basically wasted during the rainy season because the cows cannot consume everything. There is some very cool opportunities. I don't know if this is the correct term. Basically, a combination of pasture and some bushes or trees that are suitable and very palatable for the cows. And they're basically trying to get or use the deeper root system of these trees or bushes that can reach the water that is deeper in the ground during the dry season. So you have basically grass or forest production at two levels. This is grass that is getting dry during the dry season, obviously. But then you can see the trees or bushes are still producing a lot of forage for the cows. And there are different types of trees that you can use for trees, not only to produce forage. You can use it as fencing, which is really expensive in Colombia. And when you need to replace the fence every 6 years, 10 years, or just plant trees and you don't need to replace them. I worked on a farm in the Caribbean coast of Colombia for 2 years, where they have our neighbor had a palm oil palm production, and it's similar to what Cornell is doing with the sheep and the solar panels. Just use them as lawn mowers. We were getting paid to keep the cows in their production, so I don't need to have a person cutting the grass to access the palms. And this was a observation. I don't have data from that, but I noticed that the cows that were kept on those places with trees had less ectoparasites than the cows that were only in pasture, no trees. I don't know if it's biodiversity. There are more animals eating the ticks or what, but I noticed that we could spend 6 months without giving a bat to those animals, and they were totally fine. So really cool opportunities there. There are a lot of universities in Colombia working really hard on establishing this type of pasture issues. Obviously, a cow will get in and destroy everything if there's no more food. So you need to basically close the pasture for a couple of years, let the trees or bushes get to a certain height that they can recover. And that's really hard for small farmers when they only have a few pastures to rotate their cows. So that's a bigger issue. Just establishing the initial pasture, like bushes or trees. We need to work on infrastructure, irrigation systems. It's basically not in the cattle productions in Colombia. We have, we're lucky, we have a lot of water, and it could be used in a responsible way, but we don't utilize that. Labor is very affordable in Colombia. Machinery is not, and the last client that I had in Colombia, this farm in the Caribbean coast, we built our irrigation system for 250 acres within 2 months, and then we planted some grass, which was very successful. The guy went from losing money for years to like zero balance within a year, just by building this infrastructure and planting some grass. That improved the nutrition for the cows and just free some money on the production. Another part that we should have a lot of room, or we have a lot of room to improve, is record keeping at cattle production, dairy production systems in Colombia. There is a really nice example for those that are not familiar with dairy. There is a metric that is called days open, and basically counts the days between cow calving and the next time that the cow gets confirmed as pregnant. The industry set up a threshold that it should be between 100 and 120 days, and every single farm in Colombia has an open day average of 128, just because we don't keep records and they don't want to look bad. So if you go to every single farm in Colombia and ask, they're going to tell you it's less than 128. We are the most efficient country managing reproduction in dairy cows, just because we don't keep records. So that's a lot of like a big potential right there, and it's easy. We just need to establish something. There are some more software options right now in the Colombian market. When I was in private practice, there was one, and that was it, or your notebook, and that was my father's like record keeping. This cow calf this year. See you next year. So a lot of room to improve there. And again, efficiency in the production in Colombia is, I don't think it can go lower than that. So but in order to improve that, we need to research, because that's what we need. So we came up with this cool idea at the time, because it was a lot of hard work to get the students down there and the logistics from Ithaca to Colombia, to measure blood ketone bodies, which are an indicator of how much the cow is eating and hopefully how much is she producing. But there is not much information of this metabolic disease in Colombia or in pasture-based systems in Latin America. So we have a increasing production and increasing demand of milk in Latin America, because it's one of the affordable proteins in that part of the country. And we have an issue that cows use a lot of energy right after calving to produce milk, but they cannot eat enough to compensate that energy demand. So we have a lot of information of this disease or this issue in North America and Europe, but we don't have much in Latin America and pasture-based. There's some information in pasture-based cows in New Zealand, but it's quite different system from Colombia. So what we did was characterization of the farms population, and then we took this handheld meter, about this size, and you just collect the blood sample, put it on the strip, and it will tell you the ketone body concentration of that cow. We know there is a threshold based on information that was produced here at Cornell from cows that are confined and fed corn-based diets. So we don't think that applies for this case, but that's what we know. So we're gonna use that as a threshold of who's diseased and who's not. And we focus on three regions that are milk production specialized. So 6% of the cattle population in Colombia. It's not a big data set of the cattle production in Colombia. We had one animal science student from Cornell, 2 vet students from Cornell, and 1 PhD student from Cornell, but I don't remember, somewhere in the economics group, going to Colombia. We sampled 56 farms, around 1,000 cows. They want to sample more like cows generation we wanted, so we end up cutting the data set to 800 cows that were between the first 42 days after calving. Things that I want to point out: these 56 farms that we enroll house around 10,000 or 11,000 animals. So it's quite a big number. It's a good sample size. The average size of the farm, 62 hectares. That's large. So we're not talking about small dairy farmers. This is more specialized dairy farming which is consistent with the definition of this disease because we consider this disease a high production animal disease. So we were trying to look for the same profile in Colombia. Other than that, that's more for the animal part, but this is not important. And what we found is that the concentration of these ketone bodies was really low compared with anything that we know here in Colombia, in the US. So on average was 0.5. In the US, the incidence of this disease could be somewhere between the 20 to the 80%. That it's all of 1.2, so which is like way higher compared with the US. The prevalence was only 4.5, and it was associated by region. So the regions that had a higher production had also a higher incidence, but it's not significant or nothing crazy. And there were two factors that predisposed the cows to have a higher concentration of BHB. Older animals, they tend to produce more milk and have a negative energy balance higher than the younger cows. So that was associated with ketosis, and also decreased milk, increased body condition score. Cows that are really fat are more likely to develop this metabolic disease, which is similar to what we know in the US. This is more that. So we found really interesting information, and it's that this metabolic disease doesn't behave in the same way in pasture-based systems in Colombia, in specialized milk production. Unfortunately, we couldn't follow up more of those cows. This was just like one time point, and we tried to follow up with the farmers after to see if they could tell us which cows died or which cows left the production. But unfortunately, we didn't get a good response from them because nobody was on the ground, like following up with these surveys. So we couldn't make any connections of is this actually an issue or not. But we still don't know if the threshold that we are using, which is the same as US, based on completely different housing, completely different environment, and completely different feeding strategy, is relevant for these farms. So then we had the farm characterization. We tried to design the survey, putting some questions to get some information to know what is their feeding strategy, if they're using any supplements, because that's associated with better production, at least in pasture-based, when you put concentrates to supplement the grass diet. We also make some questions to see how like advanced is the infrastructure, if they're milking by hand or they're using machines. About health, we made some questions that were designed to know if they're treating their cows with antibiotics, following a protocol or not, and how like well is that done. I'm not gonna show all the questions here, but I'm just showing a few examples of what we try to get out of them. These ones, our diseases, were pointing towards, are you having a veterinarian coming to the farm, or do you have some experience or some previous technical training to detect basic diseases or like most common diseases that don't require testing in the farm? Like, is the cow lame? You can just like see the cow that is lame, but you need to have some knowledge. And then we had some questions that intend to see if they're sending samples to a diagnostic lab and how much are they doing of this. And it was quite interesting to see that big number of the farms are not sending samples to the lab, which is hyperketonemia. Milk fever, you can do it by sending the sample to a lab, but also it's very indicative of the cow is down after calving. Most likely she has hypocalcemia. That's the diagnosis. And yeah, again, some characterization side of the or how do they manage pasture, if they do any special management, and if they do any special testing for the food. because that's a good indicator of how well they manage their nutrition. And then this is the part where I'm going to try to do my best to explain what the people in economy is. So we set up this gambling game with ping pong color balls, and they have the choice to select if they want to get information of the status of the cow. So ketone bodies on each cow, and they have the option to get or pay for better food to reduce the risk of this disease in your herd. And that will help us to deter or know if the farmers are willing to invest in something to reduce the risk and how risk averse are these farmers. So we found that, and this is the basic model. We also give different tolerance of the diseases. And it's 20, 50, and 80% prevalent at the farm. And we found that the prevalence is lower in farms with the manager. It doesn't need to be the owner because in Colombia, the manager is the person boots on the ground all the time. Usually the owners of these dairy farms are engineers, physicians, surgeons, and they're at the farm probably on the weekends, but that's it. They know the whole system, but they're not the ones taking the decision daily. So risk-aware persons, people are associated with lower prevalence of this disease. And the risk-aware people were more likely to pay for the information, or, what to use very wise. We were trying to measure if the farmers were willing to pay $1.5 per test strip to know if this was worth it or not. Because on top of knowing if there is a disease, we're trying to put a technology in the ground. So we need to know if they're willing to pay for it, if it's worth it. And we found that they're willing to pay for it, that it's hard to justify with the production levels at this point. So in summary, the industry in Colombia, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. We just need to do more research. That's why Geneva is going to try to go to a nice project later this summer in a similar area, focus more in hypocalcemia, which seems to be a major issue based on the survey. What we thought from this survey was that 100% of the farms that we interviewed said that they had at some point issues with hypocalcemia. So that seems to be more of the way that we're going to try to help the producers in Colombia. And this type of research should focus on improve the efficiency of these dairy farms because it's not great right now. And some acknowledgments to the people involved in the project and farmers that allow us to get to their farms and do some of the research, and the Atkinson Center for funding this nice study. And with that, I'll answer any question. That was me.